Diana, do you and your husband have any problems? The question came out of the blue, and for a moment I didn't know how to answer. What are you talking about? I think we have the usual problems that all married couples have. Why did the question arise? My colleague turned away, concentrating on her hands as she decided whether to continue or not. Having made a decision, she moved on. Listen, I don't know how to tell you this. You know my husband took me last weekend for our anniversary. Well, I'm sure I saw your husband at the same hotel, and he was staying there with another woman. What? Are you sure? This couldn't happen. He would never do something like that to me. You must be mistaken. Well, maybe, but it was very similar. If it wasn't him, then he must have an identical double. We saw both of them, such sweet lovebirds, up close several times, and it was just like your husband. Mark went fishing with his buddies last weekend, so he said. Now it looks like he did a little fishing on the side, and it definitely looked like he caught someone. I wanted to cry and scream and rip his throat out, all at the same time. How could he do this to me? What was wrong that he was ready to break up with me after 7 years of marriage in order to lie in bed with some bitch? I muttered a thank you to Jane and returned to my office, plopping down in the overstuffed chair I had for visitors. There were no signs that he was up to anything bad. I had heard of the usual signs such as overattention and overloving, but that wasn't the case. Mark was himself caring and responsive. Was this his game? Was he aware of these signs and tried not to show them? I was completely confused. No, it couldn't be him. It had to be someone like him. Still, I had nagging doubts. What if it was him? How can I be sure? If I ask him, he might just deny it. If he was having an affair, he could warn his buddies to cover for him. Thinking back to Sunday evening when he returned, I tried to remember anything suspicious. He came in, kissed me on the cheek, grabbed a beer, and started telling me about his weekend. There was nothing unusual about this. He complained that the fish weren't biting. The small change they caught had to be thrown back. Yes, it was unusual. Mark always finished successfully. He is an excellent fisherman and knows this river like the back of his hand. He had been fishing since he was a boy, ever since his father put his first fishing rod in his hand when he was 6 years old. Yet perhaps he is telling the truth. How can I find out? I decided to call one of his friends' wives about the upcoming school holiday, and during the discussion, ask about the fish he caught. Yes, that's exactly what I'll do. Hello, Emily, this is Diana. How are you? The first part of our conversation was about normal things, children, school, and sales at the mall. Not wanting to seem too anxious, I let it drag on for 20 minutes before I got to the part I called for. I couldn't ask her directly. It would make her suspicious, and it would come back to Mark through her husband. Emily, do you have any good trout recipes? I was a little tired of the usual methods like baking and grilling and wanted something more exotic. How did you cook the fish that Dave brought home on Sunday? I waited with bated breath as Emily screamed at her kids to shut up, telling them she was on the phone. Sorry, Diana. Fish recipes, Well, Dave isn't very adventurous when it comes to food, so I stick to tried-and-true recipes. The fish he caught last weekend is still in the freezer. I didn't plan to cook it until the end of the week to cook for the weekend BBQ. As she continued, my thoughts wandered in another direction. This bastard lied to me. Others caught fish, but not him. Why? Because he wasn't fishing, he had sex with some bitch. Well, when I'm done with him, it'll cost him dearly. Diana, are you here? Emily brought me back to the present, and I answered her through the tears that began to fall. Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. The washing machine is working. I need to run. I'll call you later. Thanks for the advice. Bye. My first instinct was to confront him, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no real evidence. He will lie to get out and will be on his guard. I need more proof. That evening, Mark seemed withdrawn as we sat and ate dinner. He complimented me on the excellent food, but there seemed to be no life in him. When I tried to speak, he responded in sentences, and it was obvious that he had other things on his mind. I hoped it was guilt, and it was tearing him apart inside like it was tearing me apart. Later, we sat and watched TV for a while before he made his move. I am going to sleep. I'm not feeling my best, and I think I'll go to bed early. Are you going upstairs now? No. I think I'll watch some more. The girls at work say it's worth watching. I'll get up later. Good night. Mark leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head and his lips touched my cheek. His surprised look was enough to warn me that I needed to think of something quickly. Sorry, honey. I don't want to risk getting infected. I can't afford to get sick now. Sweet dreams. My imagination was working overtime. There was no way I was going to kiss him after he cheated on me. In my mind's eye, I saw him pleasuring his new lover. The thought alone made me nauseous. I sat in a crappy sitcom and waited for him to fall asleep. Finally, an hour later, I tiptoed up to our room and quietly looked in on him. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, and his head lay on a rumpled pillow pushed almost to the head of the bed. His hair was a damp mass and stuck to his head and face like a blonde cap. He was sweating profusely, and his body was glistening with sweat. His sleep must have been restless, as the sheets lay in a disorganized heap on his side of the bed. Mark usually slept peacefully, and I wondered if his restless sleep was caused by his guilty conscience or if he was dreaming about it. Damn him! Mark always slept naked, and tonight was no different. Lying on his back, his body was completely exposed to my gaze, and I looked at him in a new light. I loved this man with all my heart, and now I could lose him. Was this what I wanted? Maybe it was a one-time affair, and he will never cheat again. Did I really want to carry out my plan? I need to know. No matter how painful it might be, or what the consequences would be, I had to find out. Mark was my first true love, and the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The man I would like to see as the father of my children. How could he put all this at risk? I quietly took his wallet from the bedside table and quickly checked it for evidence. What I expected to find was an address, a phone number, or even some condoms. When we were dating, Mark always had a spare in his wallet. I quickly realized that using a condom wasn't for me, so I started taking the pill, and he hasn't needed condoms since. This would be another nail in our marital coffin. There was no evidence in his wallet or pants pockets. So where else can I check? His briefcase and machine also gave the same sterile results. By this time, it almost became like a game. Every time I returned empty-handed, I felt disappointed, as if I had lost. Then I checked his email on our home computer, and when it was clear, I looked at his cell phone. No luck there either. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, trying to figure out what my next step would be. In my opinion, he was guilty, and the lack of evidence didn't mean a damn thing. I was excited, and the coffee only added to my hypertrophied state of mind. I thought about what I had done so far and decided that he wasn't so smart that he wouldn't leave some evidence of his deception. I just needed to find it. Suddenly it dawned on me. I knew where it would be, in his fishing gear, of course. He knew that I never tinkered with his fishing gear for fear of breaking something. Besides, I had no interest in fishing. In the garage, I had the same luck rummaging through his tackle box and other accessories. All I had was a couple of hooks in my fingers, which made me even more angry. I was almost ready to give up when I noticed his fishing jacket hanging on a hook outside the side door. This time, more carefully, so as not to hurt myself, I searched my pockets and finally found what I was looking for. A pack of free matches from the Hyatt in Carlton, a small town about 2 hours away. In my state of mind, this was enough to condemn him and hang him. We had never been to this particular hotel, and I couldn't think of a reasonable explanation for him being there alone. Let's see how he gets out of this. When it dawned on me that he had really cheated, the real pain began. I spent the next 2 hours alternating between anger, disappointment, and humiliation. I wanted to rush upstairs, drag him off our bed and face him. No, that wasn't enough. I wanted to hurt him the same way he hurt me. I needed to see him experience the same pain and suffering that I did. As I contemplated my next move, a little gem of an idea crept into my brain and slowly took shape. By the time I was ready to go to bed, I had almost formed my plan of attack. I was going to get revenge on that bastard. I'll have sex with someone, and then bring the evidence home to Mark. I'll show him that two can play this game. The problem was that I loved him, and the thought of losing him hurt me as much as the thought of him having an affair. I didn't want to divorce him, even though my first reaction was to throw his ass out on the street. Finding someone to have sex with was easy. At 32, I looked good, and the guys in the office flirted with me. A few sales reps I've dealt with have hit on me from time to time, but so far I've always turned them down. Now I had a group of guys to choose from, some of whom were real hotties. One young guy in particular, Andy. Most of the girls in the office drooled every time he walked in. He was only 21 years old and had just graduated from university on a sports scholarship. Andy is 6 feet tall, with dark, piercing eyes and a muscular body. Quiet and modest, he seemed oblivious to the influence he had on the women around him. He exuded innocence, which made him even more attractive. I made a decision. Andy would be my means of getting back at Mark. All I have to do is seduce him. He was a man, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Over the next week, I made my move on Andy. I dressed to show off my best assets with plunging necklaces that gave him, and everyone else, a wide view of my 34D bust. I also wore my shortest, tightest skirts. Of course, I had a lot of attention, and this time I played along with them. Flirting with guys made me feel wanted again. It's not that Mark didn't do all this for me. He was always very attentive, giving me little gifts, surprises, bouquets of roses, and leaving little cards everywhere for me to find. Just knowing that he cheated made me question my sensuality. The boy's attention was the balm I needed to soothe my bruised ego. It was easy with Andy. When he first saw me, his jaw dropped and he stood there and widened his eyes. Approaching him, I closed his mouth, and then in the sexiest voice I could muster, I asked, "How are you, love?" Like what you see. If you play your cards right, you can see so much more. If, of course, you want. Leaving him to wonder if he had heard me correctly, I turned and walked away from him, punctuating each step with a sway of my hips. The same action always caused a strong reaction in Mark, which led to prolonged sexual romp. Will it have the same effect on Andy? Over the next 3 days, I continued to tease him, and he became more and more attentive and provocative in his flirting. Several girls told me to stop teasing him because it wasn't fair. He doesn't have much experience with women and may misunderstand. Jane, on the other hand, knew exactly what I was up to, and her advice was clearer. "Diana, what you are doing is not fair to Andy. He has no idea that you are using him to get back at your husband. If you have to do this, at least choose someone who can handle what's about to happen." "Thanks, Jane, but I think Andy will like it." "Who knows? Maybe I'll make it a regular thing with him." Jane simply shrugged and walked away, shaking her head, leaving me to continue with my plan. Closing the door, she said, "This will be a big mistake." Andy was interested, but hadn't made any moves yet, and I was in a hurry. I froze Mark, stopping any intimate activities. Not understanding what was happening, he began to get upset because of my refusal to talk to him about our problem. I wanted him to sweat over it, but not for too long. I decided that this Saturday was the day of my revenge. "Andy, are you busy on Saturday evening?" The light shining in his eyes told me the answer before he could croak, "No, I didn't plan anything. Why do you ask?" "Well, I thought you might want to take a lady to dinner and dancing and everything that follows. Are you interested?" "Hell yes." Then his face darkened. "But you are married. What about your husband?" "He doesn't need to know. Besides, we have some kind of agreement." I grinned. "He just doesn't know about it yet." "Yes, sure." His face lit up with a knowing smile. "Where will we go?" "Well, I was thinking about dinner at a small cozy restaurant, a few dances at a club, and then maybe we could find a room somewhere." "If you don't mind?" Andy blushed, but had recovered enough to realize that the next step was his. "Of course it sounds funny. I know such a place, and there is a motel not far from it. I can book a room." "Sounds like a date to me. You can pick me up at the north entrance of the shopping center parking lot at 7 in the evening, and we'll drive in your car." Leaning over to give him a better look at my tits, I kissed him on the lips and then whispered, "See you then, lover." The plan was in motion, and I don't think I could stop now even if I wanted to. The second step was to tell Mark that I was having a bachelorette party and wouldn't be back until later that evening. Heck, if Andy lives up to my dreams, I might not get home until Sunday. That evening after dinner, I left Mark. "Mark, honey, I called Susan today. She and some girls are going out somewhere on Saturday night. They invited me and I agreed. Oh, I hoped that we could have a good night together and solve our problems. Can't you go another time?" I gave Mark one of my stern, don't mock me looks and then told him, "I'll go whether you like it or not. It's not often that I get to go out somewhere, and perhaps another opportunity will present itself who knows when." Mark was about to answer but changed his mind and left the table. Turning at the door, he told me, "Thank you for your concern." Then he wandered off to his workshop, probably to play with his damn fishing gear. I saw the pain in his eyes and almost succumbed to it. But then I was overcome with anger and a vision of him with some blonde girl flashed through my head. "Fuck you!" I shouted after him. "This doesn't mean you care about my feelings." He walked away, and I don't think he heard the last part. This worked in my favor because he slept in the spare room for the next 2 nights. This might just become his permanent room if he's not careful, was my last thought before I went to bed that night. It was strange because it was the first time I slept alone since we got married. On Friday morning, he left before I woke up, so I didn't know how he was coping with it. I never realized how vindictive I could be, and this came as a real surprise to me. On the one hand, I was glad that he was in pain, but it was almost as painful for me to watch him suffer. I really love him, even despite his debauchery. I decided to try to relieve some of the stress on Friday night by hosting a special dinner for him. Baked potatoes, roasted asparagus, and one of the trout he caught a couple of weeks ago, cook it in foil with herbs, chili, garlic, and olive oil. I knew it was one of his favorite foods, and it might calm him down a bit. It would also ease the guilt I was starting to feel. The phone rang just as I was putting the finishing touches on the table decoration. I pressed the phone to my shoulder. The background noise was loud and I could barely hear. "Hello, Diana. It's me, Mark. The guys are having a party tonight, and seeing that you're leaving tomorrow, I thought I'd spend the night with them. Don't wait. I'll probably come late." He hung up before I could answer. He sounded very angry, and for a moment I wondered if my revenge had been such a good idea. Damn him. Why's he doing this? Hanging out with the guys, I bet he's with his mistress again tonight. Well, let's see who has the best time. I tried to sleep, but tossed and turned until he came at 3 a.m. I heard his door close and then 2 thuds as his shoes hit the floor. After that, nothing. On Saturday morning, I got up early and prepared another surprise for him. When Mark finally surfaced, it was 12:30 and he looked like crap. He was wearing the same clothes he'd been in the day before, but instead of the neat look he'd left with, he was now disheveled and bleary-eyed. The front of his shirt was stained, and the right knee of his beige pants was covered in dirt. A grunt was the only response to my cheerful, "Good afternoon." I have to admit that it was more to piss him off than how I actually felt. Taking a cup of coffee, he sat, or rather sat limply, at the kitchen table. "I saved your dinner for you. This is your favorite dish, so I thought you might like it for lunch." With these words, I placed a plate with burnt remains in front of him. 2 hours in the oven on high can have a serious impact on this type of food. It took him a few minutes to realize what I had done. Pushing him away, he groaned, "Very funny." After finishing his coffee, he returned to bed to sleep off his hangover. Maybe he was with the boys last night. He would, of course, be of little use in bed in the state he was in. Maybe she left him. This thought made me smile. "Well, Marky, if you think you're feeling bad now, wait until I get home tonight or sometime." Saturday passed quickly. Without Mark, I could spend as much time preparing as I wanted without worrying about what he would think. Not that I really care at the moment. This plan had a life of its own, and I was being dragged along by the forces that controlled it. By 6, I was almost done getting ready and had just put on my dress. I decided not to wear a bra or panties for 2 reasons. Firstly, I thought Andy would be able to better appreciate my body if he felt me while dancing. Secondly, my underwear was expensive, and I didn't want to lose anything. Mark got out of the shower while I was choosing shoes. I didn't hear him get up and go to the bathroom. He came into our room to get some fresh clothes and saw what I was about to wear. Damn it, Diana, you're not going to meet girls dressed like that. Are you on a date with someone? Don't do this. We can discuss everything. Please don't do this. His pleading made him sound like a weakling, which only made me angrier. I couldn't stand it and yelled at him, I told you that I was dating girls. If you want to talk, we can talk when I get home. Maybe then you'll listen to me. Now pack your things and get out. I need to finish getting dressed or I'll be late. Mark stood and watched, and then said something I never expected to hear. Any thoughts I had that he was a weakling were quickly dispelled by the strength in his voice. Diana, I know that you are cheating on me. I don't know who, but when I find out, he will be named in the divorce. Your attitude towards me in the last 2 weeks has been so distant, and now this. I can only come to one conclusion. You are having an affair. A tear fell from his eye, and he wiped it away before continuing. I won't be a cuckold. If I find evidence that you cheated, our marriage will be over. Think about this before you leave tonight. When he grabbed his clothes from the closet, I answered him. Sauce for goose is sauce for goose. Not quite understanding what I meant, he went to the guest room to get dressed. Now he was on the moral high ground because he didn't know that I knew about his deception. He wouldn't be so confident once everything was known. At least that's what I tried to convince myself of. He didn't come down before I left, so I left a note taped to the refrigerator door. I knew Mark, and whenever he had a problem that needed solving, he would reach for a beer. This doesn't mean he's an alcoholic, but the beer in his hand helps him think. A lot of guys are like that. Mark, you know I love you, but these last 2 weeks have been hell for me. I know we need to talk, so I decided that I would be home by 2 in the morning. Please wait for me, and I think we can resolve our issues and continue to heal our marriage. I want more than anything for you to remain my husband. But until we solve our problems, I am afraid that this will be impossible. With love, Diana. Andy was waiting for me when I pulled up, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw him. This is not the shy guy like in the office. He wore a red silk shirt to the party, unbuttoned almost to his waist, revealing his muscular chest and a muscular abs to die for. His trousers were wide but tailored and fit him perfectly. He was wearing a dark blue, lightweight woolen jacket that accentuated the entire outfit. As I approached, I leaned over to kiss his cheek, but he moved quickly and caught me off guard. His arms wrapped around me, and his mouth was harsh and demanding on mine. It wasn't what I expected, but he was inexperienced, and I just needed to show him how to please a woman. Finally, he let me go and dragged me to his car. The restaurant is nearby. I hope you enjoy Italian cuisine. Italian food is not a food that I really like, and I usually prefer something else. It was already too late anyway. Yes, I love an Italian restaurant. Lead the way. The restaurant was good, but noisy and crowded. There is no room for romance here. I will have to wait until we go to the club for more intimate activities. I was surprised by the quality of the food and really enjoyed it. At some point, I caught myself thinking that someday I would bring Mark here. Andy seemed to be well known here, and most of the staff and the owner greeted him by name. She was a plump Italian mommy who kept coming up to him, nudging him with her elbow and winking at me. She gave him the OK sign twice with her thumb and forefinger. By 8 o'clock, the food and 2 bottles of wine were gone, and we were ready to move on. The club was only half a block away, so we walked and talked. I took his hand and pressed myself against him, watching the envious glances of the other girls we passed by. You were very popular there. I understand this is not your first time? Hell no, I spend all my first dates there. It kind of sets the stage for later, don't you think? I grumbled something back while I processed the information. It wasn't his first real date, but so what? He was shy and awkward and was probably a virgin. There was little in the atmosphere of the restaurant that set the mood for anything. His inexperience shows again. Once we talk, and I show him all the beautiful things in life, he will understand it. Andy is a smart boy. He put his arm around my waist as we walked, and when we reached the door of the club, he grabbed my left breast. It was really nice, but there were about 20 people waiting to get into the club, and I felt disgusted. Lowering his hand, I whispered, "Later, my love." I headed to the end of the line, but he surprised me again. Andy walked up to the bouncer at the door and high-fived him. "Hey, man, how are you? Is there some room for two?" The bouncer smiled at him and then looked at the disgruntled guys in line. "For my best client? Always." Having removed the chain, he let us through. Andy slipped him some money. Upon entering, we paid the entrance fee and received 2 free drink cards. A deafening noise hit me, causing even the walls to tremble. We squeezed onto the small dance floor and tried to follow some kind of rhythm. This was impossible, and in the end, I motioned for him to come into the corner to give us some breathing space. Now we could start to really have fun. The couples around us were hugging and groping each other, and I felt less self-conscious in the darkened room. Grabbing him, I planted a deep French kiss on his lips, determined to teach him how to kiss to please a woman. He came back with a kiss that made my knees weak. His tongue reached out to mine and explored the depths of my mouth. For the next hour we hugged and groped each other. At 9:30 I was just getting into the mood, and the music had dulled my senses so much that I no longer felt like I was inside a bass drum in the middle of a parade. "Damn it! Look at the time! We better leave." The motel is right across the street. "But Andy, I'm just starting to have fun, and we still have a lot of time." "No, I told them that we will be there until 10. If we are late, they will vacate the room. This place is so close that it is very popular on a Saturday night." Taking my hand, we headed towards the door. This time, we were only stepped on twice. Once outside, I wondered if I had gone permanently deaf, as I had difficulty hearing traffic or people in line. Without waiting, Andy grabbed me by the arm and dragged me across the street, dodging cars inch by inch, shouting insults at the drivers if they honked at us. This night was turning into a nightmare, and I decided that this would be my one and only evening with Andy, unless he surprised me in bed, which is what he did. Once at the door, Andy grabbed me and kissed me while pulling my dress off. I tried to calm him down, but it had no effect. "Calm down, darling. Let me show you how to please a woman." Wiggling his eyebrows, which I hate, he grinned. "I've never had a complaint until now." Okay, so he wasn't a virgin, but at least he had some inexperience. His whole approach told me that he lacked practice in pleasing a woman. "Oh, yes. And how many girls were there?" "Girls! God, I quit having sex with them when I was 17. You won't believe how many horny women hang around the highway looking for adventure. Teachers, PTA members, and mothers of other athletes. It's been a buffet for 4 years. Was this guy joking? If he's been hanging out with real women for 4 years, hasn't he learned anything? Let's calm down and play a little first. We have a few hours to do the real thing. Yes, I love foreplay." Having said this, he threw off his boxers and pushed me to my knees in front of him. God, he was an idiot for what I got myself into. Jane was right. I should have chosen one of the older guys or maybe just met Mark face to face. This evening I have to go through it. I would get rid of him as quickly as possible and then go home early. Collapsed on the bed, he grinned at me and said, "How was that? How was it?" God, absolutely terrible. Well, Mark could catch up later. An excellent lover, but I have to go. I have a date with my husband, and I wouldn't want to be late. How late is it, damn it? It was only 10 in the evening. We were only in the room for 20 minutes. Ooh, you can't leave yet. I have a pleasant surprise for you. While looking for my dress and shoes, I told him, "I'll worry about that another time, baby, but right now I'm in a hurry." You can't leave. What will I tell my friends when they arrive? They were looking forward to it. I told them how hot you are and how you can handle all of them. I did it for you, baby. I know what people like you need. He said it as if he was sure it would change my mind. You did what? How dare you? Who the hell do you think you are? I'm not one of those girls. From where I am, I see a married woman cheating on her husband. Now stop pretending and come back here. Unfortunately for him, the closest thing to me was a lamp sitting on the bedside table. It had a heavy ceramic base that hit him on the head, causing him to freeze. Not sure if I had killed him. I checked his pulse and breathing, and he seemed fine. A trickle of blood was running down his cheek, and he would have a terrible headache when he woke up. Well, damn it, he deserved it. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the room, leaving the door ajar so his friends could find him and keep an eye on him. I ran, blinded by tears, 3 blocks to my car, and collapsed behind the wheel. I had to wait until my hands stopped shaking before I could put the key in the ignition and start the damn thing. A date that was so promising turned into hell. I was angry and upset with Andy. He made me look like a fool with his innocent little boy behavior, and I, the idiot I am, fell for it. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but there should be some romance in a date. But this new age approach didn't seem to involve any seduction on the guy's part. The journey home was a mixture of humiliation and pain. I couldn't blame Mark for that. I brought this on myself, so I had to deal with it. One good thing is that I was no longer excited. Pulling into the driveway, I sat for a moment and then braced myself for what was to come. Mark was waiting in the living room and looked up in shock as I stumbled in. I don't know if it was because I arrived early or because of the state I was in. My hair and makeup are a mess. My dress is missing one shoulder strap, and my shoes are left in the car. I definitely looked like my evening was royal. Well, you did it. All this nonsense about loving me, wanting to save our marriage. What does all of this mean? Did you really think that I would accept this and continue as if nothing had happened? I hope it was worth it. Now just listen, mister. None of this would have happened if you had behaved properly. I know about your little love nest 2 weeks ago. You were seen at the Hyatt in Carlton with some blonde girl. So don't be so moral towards me. All I did was have revenge sex, so you know how I felt. Now we need to discuss all this and live our lives. I'll make some coffee and we can sit down like we used to and figure this all out. I stopped to take a breath, and Mark took the floor. I don't know who anyone saw, but it wasn't me. I was 200 kilometers away, on the other side of the state, fishing, as I said. Now I've played my trump card. Jane saw you, she was there with her husband, and they saw you with another woman. I also found this in your fishing jacket. I pulled out the matches and threw them at him. How come Dave caught a fish that weekend and you didn't? Because you didn't fish. Exhausted, I collapsed into a chair. Okay, I'm waiting for you to lie, or you could tell the truth for a change. Sitting in the chair, my dress rode up, giving Mark an unobstructed view of my pussy, and the dried cum stuck to my labia and thighs. Mark's look of disgust made me feel cold, and I shuddered. First of all, Dave almost never fishes, but he likes to go out with us. Either we give him a couple of pieces to keep Emily quiet, or, as in this case, he buys them on the way home. The matches are not mine. They belong to Steve. He travels with his work and probably picked them up during his trip. One evening, he gave them to me to light, and I must have put them in my pocket. Mark was angry, and I had to admit that he was either telling the truth or thinking fast. What about Jane seeing you? Explain that. I don't know this, Jane, so I can't explain it, but I can prove that I was on the other side of the state on Saturday afternoon. He pulled out his wallet and pulled out a gas receipt, stamped and dated from a gas station on the other side of the state, just as he said. Damn, he was good. He must have figured out in advance what I was mad about and managed to forge that receipt. It even had his car registration on it. I almost told him it was a fake, but then I remembered I saw the receipt in his wallet the night I checked. Everything didn't go as I planned. But Jane said, "Who the hell is Jane?" "You know Jane, who works with me." "No, I don't know her. I've heard you talk about her, but I've never met her. When we meet, of course, I will tell her everything I think. Why did she want to destroy my marriage? Why did I upset her so much? He was right. She had never met him. How did she know it was him? She saw his photograph on my desk quite often. That must be the case. While I was thinking about this, Mark disappeared into the kitchen, probably to get another beer so we could work things out. Here are your things. Let me know where you're staying, and I'll send the rest. He returned with 2 suitcases, which he threw in front of me. Taking my purse, he took out the house key. On Monday morning, I met with a lawyer and filed for divorce. I transferred half of the joint funds to my own account. What remains in the joint account is yours. Now get out. This couldn't happen. What have I done? He denied cheating on me even after he was seen. Okay, he explained other things, but not this. He probably swapped cars with Steve or someone else, and they filled up with gas to cover for him. That's all. He just acted macho and took responsibility. As soon as he calms down, we'll work things out. Okay, I'll go, but let's talk about this before you start spending money on a divorce lawyer. I know that you will understand what's what as soon as you calm down. Taking the bags, I carried them to the car and sat down, wondering where to go next. I didn't want to go to my mother, especially like that. The next option was a local hotel. I looked terrible. They did give me a room, but with strict instructions, no men. Who could blame them? It took all my willpower, but I gave Mark a chance to think. For 2 weeks, I waited for him to come to his senses and come back to me. Finally, I had enough and called him at home. As soon as he heard my voice, he hung up. I called back twice, and he did the same thing each time. I waited an hour, then tried again, but it was busy. He took the phone off the hook. The next day, I called him at work, but the secretary told me that he was not accepting my calls. If I have something important, I should contact his lawyer. Mark held onto his weapon and refused to talk to me. For 3 months, I tried to get him to talk to me and understand the reason. If I could come to terms with his cheating, why couldn't he do the same? Every day I became more and more upset. How could he not understand my point of view? I lost all my anger, replacing it with bouts of depression and bouts of crying. My life was turning into crap, and I didn't understand why. I then tried to wait for him at home, but he just looked at me, then ignored me and walked inside, closing the door in my face. The next day, I was given an intervention order at work. This prohibited me from attempting to contact Mark directly and from approaching within 100 meters of him. Andy made sure to get revenge by telling everyone at work that I had fun with him and his mates. Even though I denied it, everyone else saw me teasing him and believed his story. All the men hit on me for weeks until I kneed Andy in the balls, and that's when they realized I couldn't afford to stay at the hotel. So I returned home to my parents. They sympathized with me, but said it was my own fault. I should have talked to Mark. As Dad said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. I lived in the hope that he would not go for a divorce. He was just trying to scare me into backing off and apologizing. How the hell could I apologize if he didn't want to talk to me? I remember that Tuesday clearly. I was sitting at my desk finishing the bill when the secretary called and said that 2 men wanted to see me at the counter. Thinking they were salespeople, I put on my best smile and walked towards them. Mark stood there with another man, talking quietly. My heart skipped a beat. Did he forgive me? Mark nodded in my direction and said something to another man who approached me. Mark stood aside, not taking part in what was about to happen. Then I realized that my marriage was over. Diana Andrews? I nodded affirmatively, unable to speak. Your husband, Mark Andrews, is filing divorce papers with you. The basis for this is your adultery. If you do not have a lawyer, then I suggest you do so as soon as possible. Nodding to Mark, he left, having completed the task assigned to him. Mark, no, I thought you loved me. How could you do this to us? I love you. I know we have problems, but we can certainly overcome them if we love each other. Mark's voice was cold, his words calculating and almost emotionless. I truly loved you with all my heart. But you took this love and tore it out of me, and with it, my heart. Now all I feel for you is pity. You decided to listen to someone who doesn't even know me. Anyway, where is that bitch? I want to say a few words to her. Yes, she will prove that you cheated and we can forget about it. I'll call her. Running up to the desk, I asked the giggling secretary to call Jane for me. Jane came and I thought I could finally get him to admit the truth. Jane, tell Mark what you saw that weekend at the hotel. Jane shrugged and told her story again. I saw your husband staying there with another woman. Mark gasped. Did you see me staying at the Hyatt in Carlton? Jane shook her head. No, I saw her husband, not you, and it wasn't the Hyatt. We stayed at the Regent Hotel in West Bend. Mark and I were both confused, but for different reasons. What is she talking about? Jane turned to me and said, I don't know what's going on here, but I saw the same man who came here and picked you up for lunch and after work. The man you took with you to that 3-day conference in August 2 years ago. You introduced him to us as your husband, Wally. Fear paralyzed me when I realized she was talking about a guy I had a brief affair with 2 years ago. This story completely slipped my mind. Jane didn't really know my husband. It dawned on Mark at that very moment, and an expression of triumph crossed his face. Mark turned and walked out, shouting for everyone to hear, "See you in court!" My fate was sealed. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.